let's get started. Again, the topic is taming the wild, wild west and bring your own device. I'm thrilled and honored to have two people up here. First one being Kevin Capwell from Onalaska School District, as well as Dan Scott, Director of Technology from Elmbrook School District. So I will say two great visionaries in their districts and have been working on BYO and BYOD for, I'll say, for many years. And what we want to do is we want to first start out with, we'll turn it over to Kevin. But if we can ask Kevin just to give us a little background on his school district and what he's doing.
Once again, I'm Kevin Capwell, the Data Systems Director for the School District of Onalaska, and I'm getting through the back row. All right, good deal. We have about 3,000 students district-wide. We have 8 buildings total, 5 academic, so 3 elementaries, a middle school and a high school, and 3 administrative buildings. We've started our BYOD pilot at our middle school, and I would say we started that about 2 years ago. What we wanted to do is we picked a specific grade, and it happened to be some teachers who were willing to work with us and be flexible. It was our 6th grade at the middle school, and we said, look, instead of unplugging kids when they come in for BYOD, why don't we try allowing them to use their own devices? Now, we also put some limitations on that. It was internet only, so no servers, no printers. We also made sure that we limited the bandwidth, and of course, thank you SEPA, we still content filtered. Number of devices on the network, and this stays pretty consistent. Since we've opened it up to the wide district, we have much more BYOD users and connected devices than we have district devices via SSID by quite the margin. And I only see that BYOD increasing in percentage, and the number of district-owned devices decreasing because of the expanded amount. Right now, district-wide, we have about 120 APs, and they're all the 3610 APs from Enterasys, and they connect back to a C4110 controller. Now, because paranoia runs deep in me, yes, I do have 2 controllers in case one fails, because I didn't want to have all of my APs go dark because my controller was deciding to have a snow day. So for the most part, once again, we see that we have quite a few BYOD devices on the network. In this case, it was over 500. Total in the district, we have about 1,400 district-owned devices. We're about 70% Mac, 30% PC. We have about 300 iPads, and we just got our first Chromebook group, so about 30 Chromebooks that we're starting to play with right now. Now, of course, we had individual Kindles and Chromebooks in the LMCs before this, but we're now going to do a pilot with our 5th grade, with one building's 5th grade, which is why we're going to use the Chromebook specifically at that level and see what happens. We have 2 network SSIDs. We have SDO Wi-Fi, which is for district-owned and screen staff connections. Quite simply, we have a form. And if a staff member says, I need to have my personal device on the school network, they have to get it signed by their administrator. They have to bring the device to us. We check to make sure it has current antivirus, because we're not loading the district one on there. That it has the current security patches, that it has current malware and security patches up to date. And if all those things are true, we sign off that it's good to go, and then the staff member signs, and I'll get to you in a second, the staff member signs that they understand that the district is not liable if someone steals, breaks, or damages their device. Question?
Do you require antivirus on your Mac devices that staff might bring in?
Yes. And the reason why I require it is, with things like Java and other vulnerabilities getting up there, Sophos has a free version of Sophos for the Mac for home users, not for your districts, but for home users. So I can point them right at a professional package, say install this, and then we know we're good to go. And they never turn down free.
One more question.
Yes?
How often do you check the devices and make sure they're up to date?
Because the staff members would beat me with sticks, if I did it any more frequently, I do it once a year. So I put that information into our radio server, and then literally at the, just before the beginning of the academic year, I go back to that radius file and I delete it out. So at that point, they have to go through the process all over again, or they're not getting on.
Do you make recommendations or offer certain freeware programs that you recommend, or?
We make recommendations, but for liability purposes, we do not install, and our district administrators have not asked us to do home support. And matter of fact, before we implemented this, I specifically said, support me on this, because, okay, you want to have staff members bring equipment, fine, but we're not going to become home techs as well as district techs. Thank you very much, we have enough machines already.
What do you do in the way of the discussion on fairness, as far as quality of access to technology? You have a certain sector using their devices, a certain percentage of the kids who don't have devices. You just supply them with something off a card?
That's a very good question, and that's 100% correct. What we do is for, if a staff member knows they're going to have something that requires a network device, and it may not even be a fairness issue, it could be, oops, left it at my locker, left it at home, whatever. At that point, we do have, I did mention we have 300 iPads in the district, and we do have MacBook cards as well. So we do have devices that can be checked out through the library, and because we do BYOD, that means we can have those cards go further, because then we don't have to check the entire card out to one individual.
Do you run into issues with charging and when you divide up a card like that?
Fortunately, unless it's the MacBooks, the iPads have enough of a lifespan on the battery that we've been able to make it through the day. Are there any other, another question in the back?
What do you do, like, you got a teacher that takes it, has an assignment, wants to do something or that with it, and, the kids come and they've got different, maybe one's got a phone, the iPad, whatever it might be, Mac, tablet, whatever. How do you do that? The teacher said, oh, I wanted everybody to be able to work on this type thing. Is it just that you're talking with your teachers about if you're going to come up with an assignment or a lesson plan that involves technology and a technology device, make sure you know what your classes have got?
Well, and a lot of the BYOD, comes as to what type of question are they looking to answer. Sometimes, rather than checking something out from the library, the teacher will have the kids work in groups. One person with some sort of smart device, and that smart device could be an iPod Touch. I mean, it doesn't have to be a smartphone. It doesn't have to be an iPad. It can be something very simplistic, something with a Wi-Fi interface. So then, maybe the instructor, has, find out these particular facts, and it breaks the kids up into groups, and they go on their fact-finding mission. And so they know what to get into, before they make that request. The other thing that we're doing a lot of is we just set up our own Google domain this year. So if we need to get to the, bare minimum of lowest common denominator, really is what I should say, of network or document editing, then we do that with Google Apps and Google Docs.
Okay, you got like 50% void, and if that continues to increase, you're going to kind of decrease your cost for what you might purchase.
Yes. Our administration specifically believes at this point that we would not be able to economically sustain a one-to-one initiative,
Right.
Which is why we chose to go BYOD.
But like coming up smarter balance, that's going to require totally different, you're not gonna be able to do it on this.
Correct.
So are you having a plan in place that you would still be able to implement those kind of standards?
That's another good question too. Matter of fact, last year, we started replacing labs at the school district specifically with Smarter Balance in mind. So what we did is we highlighted at least one lab at every building and 2 at the middle school that were going to be updated and refreshed over the course of last year and this summer, specifically for a Smarter Balance. And we're a Smarter Balance beta site, so we started the tests just this last week already. And all I'm going to say is, wow. We allocated a couple days for the math test, and this is not just, you know, A, B, C, D sort of stuff. They needed more time than was allocated.
Yeah, we're doing ours next month.
Well, we started with math, we're going over the language arts, and then later on this month we're going to hit elementaries. Same thing all over again. So when calculus comes up on the 3rd grader screen, I wouldn't be surprised at this point.
Well, it's leveling that, right, so it finds it.
It's supposed to, but when you see those first couple questions, hold on to your hats, socks, and anything else that's on extremity.
Kevin, does your internet people have the same access, like users, like a student logs into the BYOD network and the active network has the same access and still take it with staff? The same access to the internet when they're on the network?
They are content filtered already. So, you know, because of SEPA, we still have to do the content filtering. And right now, we're using Palo Alto as a next-gen firewall as our method of content filtering. So today, right now, do they have the same rules that everybody else does? Yes. Turn the page. We installed our Palo Alto firewall before the semester break. I mean, just recently, within the last month or two. Come the fall, we're going to have that, we're calling it Firewall 2.0. We're going to hook that up to Active Directory, and then the elementaries will filter differently than the middle school and the high school. Because BYOD, we're not doing, 802.1x authentication here, so I'm not asking them for their username and password. My administration specifically asked me for, here we go, Panera-like access, which means no users, no usernames, no passwords to authenticate or connect to the wireless. So that means, we're doing things by MAC address, radius. So because I don't know who you are, BYOD is always going to get the tightest content filtering that I have to offer, because I don't know who you are.
The administration listens to it out, then we do it.
I'm sorry, I missed the question?
If you let the administration would like to do authentication, then it would be the same on both sides of it. To let you authenticate?
If you were able to deploy 802.1x, would you be able to?
Yes, if I did 802.1x, then I would authenticate based on who you are. Are you a teacher? Are you a student? Elementary, middle, high school? So yes, absolutely. But that's not an option unless my administration changes their mandate.
You said you are confirming that screen staff have antiviruses up to date security patches right when they want to sign up. Are you doing anything to ensure they do that way? Those devices?
It's a yearly sign-up. So when they're done, literally what we do is we go into our radius server at the end of the academic year and before September 1st rolls around, and we have a section. Here's all the staff members who've been approved. We take that, ball it up, throw it away. So now they have to get everything signed again before they can get their selected devices back on the network. And BYOD, once again, internet only and throttled internet. No more than, right now, I've got about 130 meg coming in, and I've got 35 meg going up. I don't allow any one person any more than 1.5 meg on BYOD today.
That's generous.
Well, no, now, wait a minute, he said, now, my partner here told me that's generous, and in fact, it is, but when we first did BYOD and we did our test pilot at the middle school, we didn't ratchet it down that much. You might want to learn from my mistake, because what I ended up doing is, when we brought BYOD to the Y district, I did the math. Let's see, at 1 meg per person, 500 people, that sounds pretty bad. So at that point, we originally ratcheted down further. I had complaints from the middle school because they were used to a freer hand on the internet, and we are increasing our bandwidth to make BYOD still effective. So by this fall, I expect we'll have 200 meg coming in and 105 meg going up.
How do you handle the kids that, or parents that can't afford the BYOD as far as the district? Do you have a policy or?
Not a policy, but we do have the equipment that can be checked out from the carts and the LMC directors. So I've got iPads, MacBooks. We have the ability to have people, and it's not just socioeconomic. It could be, hey, I left my device at home today, or hey, it's out of charge.
So it's just for the day and not for the year, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we don't have those devices going home. The first hand was in the way back.
What kind of percentage do you have of kids who are forgetting or aren't able to get a device? I'm just trying to get a handle on like numbers of available devices.
I would actually have to kick that question to the building itself, because I bet that would change by the building. I would say for the most part, I would say for the most part, kids are pretty much attached to their devices anyway. So, since we've stopped seizing them and started allowing them to use them, now keep in mind the first thing we said, classroom teacher makes the rules. If the classroom teacher does not want BYOD, they do not have to have it there. They can tell the kids, put it away, because that's not what we're doing for this particular class. So we gave the first choice to the teachers. Second choice is, do you have the device and how it's used? Strangely enough, we've done BYOD at the middle school more than a year now. And certain teachers we've had a little pushback on, saying that, hey, maybe BYOD is something we want to limit more than we want to expand. It's not all of them, but there are some that have talked to the principal, and the principal and I sat down and talked about, how can we educate the educators in regards to, when is the right time to use a mobile device? And that's what we're working on with the staff right now.
Can you talk about a little bit about your NAC controls that you're using? You talked about antivirus. What are you doing for like OS patching, or what other NAC controls are you doing?
Sure. I do not have a NAT server today. That's one of the slides that are going to coming up later. I don't have NAC today, pardon me. But one of the things that we're doing is, I did mention the AV, so we do have AV both on district and non-district equipment. And right now, we're strongly leaning towards Dell's Case product as patch management. Just like I have Sophos as my antivirus for the entire district, so I can tell from the council who's up to date, who has a virus, who has a problem. I want to switch over to Case, or I also looked, well, it used to be called Big Fix from IBM, but IBM gave it a new name. I don't remember what it is. So I'm looking at that as the leading contender to handle exactly the patch management. In the back again?
Pushback from parents saying, I don't trust anybody at the school. Somebody might knock the iPad out of my kid's hands. Who's going to pay for that when it's damaged by someone?
Sure. I can't think of any specific vandalism requests that have passed my desk, but one of the things that we've had for years already is we have IP-based cameras in the hallways and in all the common areas at all of our buildings, K-12. So the one thing that I can point to is there was one teacher who did not allow backpacks in a lab. So they had them all lined up outside the lab, and someone was having a bad day that day. They came by, and they probably should have checked out for the soccer team, because they booted that bag with, of course, a brand new iPad in it, or not iPad, sorry, iPod Touch in it. Shattered it. But because we had the cameras in the hallway, we knew precisely who the punter was. And we were able to say, hello, is this you? And is this the bag going across the hallway? Yeah, okay. You have to talk to these folks and do restitution. That's what our police liaison officers are for in regards to vandalism.
Kevin, if I can add, I want to keep the session. These are great questions. I want to keep the session going. Make sure that we get to Dan as well.
Sorry,
no, that's great.
Just answering as I go.
If I could just go back one. If I could ask you to touch on a little bit, because there's some questions I saw from Greg as far as he talked a little, made mention of access control or network access control. What are you doing today as far as visibility? How are you able to look inside your network?
Sure.
See who's on, see what kind of device is on, is it an iPad, those types of things.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
One of the things we're using right now is NetSite and OneView as the management programs, which we purchased with our Enterasys gear. And what I really like about this is the fact that it runs cross-platform. On OneView, I can actually run it on my iPad, and I can see by SSID how many people are connected. I can see how much bandwidth they're using. It's in a graphical format. It's platform agnostic. And as a network manager, I have this information at my fingertips. So when I presented something similar to this to the board, talking about what are we doing with BYOD, I could show them by graph and by how much data, how much we're putting through the network right now and how much BYOD had started up.
Thanks, Kevin. You want to talk a little bit about your growth, and then I think we'll move on to Dan.
Sure. Okay. So for the most part, what we're doing right now, and I mentioned this a little bit already, is that teachers kind of push other teachers, and in some cases, some of them push for more BYOD, others aren't in favor of it. Our administration specifically gives that choice to the staff as to how they choose to implement BYOD. But as we've seen from the numbers, and that number is increasing, that it's a successful program for us. And our middle school principal and about 4 other people did a presentation at Slate this year, talking specifically about BYOD and how we've done it at the middle school. And that's been very popular. It's worked very well.
Thanks, Kevin. I know there's lots of questions that are looming out there, but I think we can. I want to move on. I want to reintroduce Dan Scott, Director of IT for Elmbrook School District. Those of you who don't know where it is, southeastern Wisconsin. It's near and dear to my heart, where I graduated from. So, Dan, if you could talk a little bit about your background in your school.
Certainly, yeah. Enrollment's about 7,100. It's unfortunately declining, so we're dealing with that as well as the school. Technology and declining enrollment is a hot issue. 5 elementary, it used to be 6, closed 1 last year. 2 middle, 2 high school. In talking with Gene on this presentation, I had dubbed our current BYO version 1.0 because it's more of a public network than it actually is a BYO initiative within the district. And one of the things that we're doing is we're taking BYO very deliberately at Elmbrook, and we're letting our curriculum and our one-to-one learning initiative to drive our BYO need. And we see a demand for it now, and so now we're going to start building out some additional framework and resources before we fully implement. Currently, we do have the public network. We allow staff and students to bring devices in, and it's very loosely policed. And it is up to the teacher. Right now, we're allowing the teacher to police the classroom and make that determination on their own. I think a year and a half ago, we turned on this public network, and now we've seen about 2,000 devices. Now, those devices could be anything from a smartphone to a tablet to a whatever. Right now, there's no restrictions or controls, but it gave us more of an insight on what would happen if we turn this on. What impact will it have on our network, on our bandwidth? And we've gained a lot of information out of this, out of that initiative and turning on that environment and that network. 3,500 district-owned devices on our network. That's a mix of both wired and wireless. Currently, we're an Enterasys and an HP customer, and migrating towards Enterasys. And about 306 APs is accurate, and that's actually increasing. When we first put Enterasys in, or our wireless in, we did it for capacity, or I'm sorry, switch that, coverage. And that's the you know, same that Kevin's dealing with. You put an access point in the hallway and you space it out every 75 feet or whatever the situation is or the design calls for. And what you'll find quickly is that that is nearly not enough by any stretch of the imagination. For any BYO initiative, any CART initiative, anything higher than you know, a handful of devices per classroom, you're going to see that your access points are not going to stand up to that. So what we did this summer is we actually went through and we outfitted each classroom with a data drop, and we went every other classroom. And the only reason we did every other classroom at this point is because we ran out of time. And this summer we'll go back and we'll do every classroom at the middle school and the high school. So we'll be, I think from an infrastructure standpoint, we'll be capable and ready for 30 devices per classroom, I hope. But I'm fairly confident. I know Mark says we'll be okay, so I believe him.
So if I look to order APs and I can't get any because of you, I'll know who to come to.
I have them all. I have them all. The interesting thing that we saw on our wireless network, and that says doubled every 18 months, and we continue to see that trend, is that you know, once you turn a public network on, it's going to double the amount of devices instantly. As soon as they discover it, and also the number of devices that the district-owned devices. So you really, you know, when you're considering a BYO, the first thing you need to look at is when you say, how do I put BYO into my environment, the first thing you need to do is fortify your infrastructure. Because if you have a capacity-based or a coverage-based system and you had no plan for capacity, you'll be quickly outpaced by the number of devices.
How does that affect your internet?
Oh, it stinks. It's terrible. So I said to Kevin that his 1.5 meg was generous. You know, we saw initial, I mean, the internet bandwidth goes through a crawl because if you don't plan that capacity, so we have to throttle the public network, which we do right now. We don't allow any streaming services, no Apple, no YouTube, no Pandora, and basically it's used for light internet surfing and that sort of thing. Now, when you know, we want to get to version 2.0 where, you know, internet bandwidth is increased. We currently don't have a NAC device. I don't want to quite get off topic here yet though, but very similar to the way Kevin is set up. If you authenticate to our public network, you are basically routed out to the internet. So you get no internal access. You get some internal access to resources like DNS, DHCP, and that sort of thing, but your traffic is then routed out to the internet once you establish a connection. And it's a very remedial BYOD solution right now, admittedly.
Is your public network pretty much the same as like the students' network then as far as what they can get to, or?
No. No.
Which one's more like restricted?
Public network by far. It's filtered. We still filter it the same. It's filtered as if you're part of our network, as part of the private network, but it's we restrict it just from a bandwidth standpoint, so we're not seeing people trying to stream YouTube and that sort of thing on the public.
And is that 2,000 average daily, or that's a certain point?
That's about average daily. I mean, it's, you know, it fluctuates. One of the things that that everybody should consider when you build out your BYO infrastructure. And you can't say I have 1,000 students, so I'm going to have 1,000 devices, or whatever the number is. Because you need to account that the student's going to have a cell phone. And whether or not you allow access to the network, it's still going to connect to your radio, okay? You're going to have to consider the fact that the student might bring in an iPad one day and a desktop or a laptop the next day. He or she may have multiple devices that they're connected into that network. So you have to plan capacity from your radio standpoint appropriately. So next slide.
2.0. Tell us about what's next for Elmbrook.
Well, and the reason that we're so like I said, we were so deliberate on BYOD is that we're sort of letting curriculum drive it. The other thing that we had a struggle with from Elmbrook's perspective is that if I put 30 of these, whatever these are, into the hands of students in the classroom, now I've created a classroom management issue. And how do I turn these devices into productivity devices within my network? And we recently partnered with a company called Stoneware, which I actually met through Dave 5 years ago. So we kind of stored that in our memory bank. And what Stoneware does is it will give us any device access within our network. So it's cloud-based computing. The way I explain it to people is it's a beefed up SSL VPN, and through the controls, group membership, you have almost an infinite number of controls. I can take any device and access district resources that I want the students to access. So while I could still route them out to the internet through a public or a BYOD, they can access their files. They can access, if I wanted to, streaming apps or remote desktop apps through this Stoneware product. And now I've taken any device that the student wants to bring in and I've turned it into a productivity app. And the other nice piece about Stoneware is that they also own Land School. Anybody familiar with Land School? Use it. Within their web network product, they have what's called they call it a dissolvable Land School client. So I don't have to install software onto a personal device, but the teacher can instruct the students, I want you to go to Land School. Teacher can then control the device very similarly to what they do in the labs with a fully installed Land School. So now the teacher has classroom management software built into the BYO initiative. We'll in earnest start this process in this fall, and that is at the high school level. At the middle school level, we'll look at a one-to-one initiative. So we're only going to support BYO. We did a survey not too long ago, and I think around 90% of our students have personal devices. And whether or not those personal devices will meet our specs, we haven't. And we mean personal devices beyond cell phones and iPods. So they have a laptop, they have an iPad, they have an Android-based tablet, they have something. But we'll get to the point where we need to specify screen size, keyboard, whatever. But we think we'll have a very large buy-in initially from the students on their own devices. Web 2.0 or BYO 2.0 for us will also incorporate network access control, which we currently don't have. We were trying to implement it this last summer, but it turned to a dollar and cents issue. So prior to us rolling out a full in-classroom BYO, and we'll have this network access control in place, and we're looking at the Interisys product to do that. We see the last bullet point. We use Edmodo, Moodle, BrainPop, tons of other online resources and internal hosted resources. And Stoneware will provide access to all those, single sign-on access to all those for the students.
And aren't you reworking the AUP, your acceptable use policy, to reflect it?
Yeah, so, initially it was, leave your cell phones in your bag. We kind of took that out of the acceptable use policy and said, it's not there anymore, use whatever device you have. But we'll have to rewrite AUP in earnest to support a BYO. We're not, that'll be another summer initiative that will start that writing process and make sure it makes sense for us. And AUP, we have an AUP right now for any district-owned device, and it's, don't do bad things, kids, strongly worded letter, right? But I think we need a way to support it software-based and enforce it instead of it being a stern finger shake.
Does your AUP work better than ours? Okay.
Is that effective?
Yeah.
Okay, now a little bit of feedback here, because we got these wonderful speakers, because they also would like to hear your experiences. Anyone here? Okay, how many people here have some sort of permission, shall we say, for students to use their own devices, some form of BYOD? Okay, now keep your hands up if you're using it curriculumly. Okay, any of you guys have tips?
We just do it for like IEP purposes.
Yeah?
That's the only way we really do it right now. That's gonna change, but.
Anyone incorporating some of the other YouTube and other sort of devices and, shall we say, not quite book learning, but on their way to it?
At the staff discretion.
Fair enough.
It's kind of the staff discretion.
There's one thing, again, I work in some states. One thing I'm seeing a lot in Ohio, where I think their economic situation has made it so that one-to-ones are really dying, so that they've had to go more toward a BYOD environment. They're allowing the NAC to differentiate their access. So if you're this science teacher and you're using some of the different flip learning resources that are out there for algebra and science and all that, they put the digital driver's license or the visual citizenship first. You take that so that you appreciate the wireless, you have respect for it. Anyone familiar with the University of Kentucky? University of Kentucky, not to dive out too much, just a minute here, but it's something that's kind of useful because it also gets to this, acceptable use policy. First, what they're doing there, and this is sort of an interesting practice, don't want to say best practice. Again, just one login per year. You don't have to learn password, it fingerprints who you are. So that if you are a fifth grader that is not going to be part of this guy's new Khan Academy-based science, well, you're going to get different access. We know exactly what it is, and you can assess it too if you wish. But this is what's being used in those districts, because they're saying, I don't want to always buy APs, and I don't want my infrastructure to be treated any differently than what Gene Mickelson had to do when I went to Madison and got my driver's license. I must respect it. So they use this as a front end. So the University of Kentucky's digital driver's license is absolutely free. But it has all the different modes, all the different stuff that also is part of Priority 1 funding for SIPA. Now, every district here has to, of course, have digital driver's license, otherwise you're not getting any of your Priority 1 either. That was as of July 1st in the auditing. But a lot of that is being taught come February or November. Until then, you've had your BYODs on your network. So you let them on, as if they have access to it. Or is it like what the state says for Gene to drive on your highway? It really is granted by the state as permission. You earn it. So that's why they tie this in. And those kids then who are in his Khan Academy science class, where BYOD is now becoming curricular, get more bandwidth. And then also for the other kids that need it, like the iPads for special ed, they can have differentiated bandwidth. But I'm seeing that used, this digital driver's license. I can send it to you if you want the website. It's absolutely free. It ties in with your Active Directory or whatever. But it's a way of saying you cannot get on my network until you understand the rights and rules. And because the differentiation, if you misbehave, that's where the AEP limits to. So it's whether it's being used in Ohio where they're letting expanded bandwidth only to those people who are really using it in a career, then everybody else can be in the guest. That's just one of the options.
Somebody asked the question, what impact does it have on your bandwidth? I mean, we saw it double. It's pretty easy math. You look at the number of devices that are now included on your network, and what the expectation would be is that you go from 3,000 to 5,000, you can expect a huge spike in your internet traffic. And that's what we saw, and that's kind of what we expected. But You know, we know that when we go in earnest to BYO and one-to-one, you know, one-to-one at the middle school, we're looking at adding almost 1,800 Chromebooks to our environment. You know, BYO on a full adoption, I expect right now we have 2,000. I expect that number to go up because we have 1,200 students per high school. So I mean, I would expect you know, wider spread 2,500 devices, maybe even more. We're going to have to increase and improve our bandwidth for sure.
And learn from my mistake. It's always easier to start off with smaller amounts of bandwidth and increase rather than decrease that bandwidth. Because then they chase you with sticks.
You're still too generous, way too generous. I give them 600K.
I wish I could go back, but.
How do you handle guest speakers at parent meetings, or somebody brings in a machine in the evening or something?
Depending on what content needs to be covered, we either go through a abbreviated, get them on the regular network if it's something that needs to be, you know, more of a faster, more global connection, or if it's just passive internet stuff, they go right on guest.
The question was, how do you handle guest speakers?
Did you find that students would forget their device so they could use the district-owned device, therefore increasing the amount of devices you had to keep on hand, or was that not as much of an issue for you? Or did you do anything to discourage them from forgetting?
No, but you know, I usually see the students pretty much glued to their devices anyway. So, you know, if they can retain those devices and use them, if the instructor allows, no. We haven't had to do any anti-forgetting policies.
I believe you both mentioned primarily this being used just for internet access. What do you think about text messaging and phone calls, and if it's a smartphone, they've got so many other access, therefore they have the ability to go anywhere and do anything, how are you monitoring that kind of decision?
If they are doing something with SMS, text calls, well, calls are easier to trace unless they've got the Bluetooth device in the air. But long story short, if they're using their own network, we as an entity, as a school district, we are not providing those resources. Therefore, I do not feel bound to, you know, fall under SEPA because I'm not providing that service. It's like if they went down to the public library and the public library doesn't filter like we do. Well, it's because the library has their own set of rules. So when they're on their own devices with their own networks, they can access what they can access, assuming the instructor allows it.
I would tend to disagree. If you require the device for an activity, and you as a school say you need an internet device for this activity, and you're allowing 3G, 4G access, I think you're liable.
The problem is that if we're asking it as part of the curriculum, any 3G, 4G device should have a Wi-Fi interface.
I'm agreeing.
Therefore, I don't think the staff members are going to do any digital frisking of the students to make sure they're not on 3G rather than the Wi-Fi connection in our building. So therefore,
What do you do about students who have phones now? If I'm a student,
In our particular environment, they aren't allowed to use the phones, unfortunately.
Well, how do you enforce that then?
Only during certain times. They enforce it like normally anything else, any kind of discipline policy.
And that's how I would continue to enforce it.
That's how our policy is written.
Yeah,
Have
because
it in there saying you cannot.
I'm just saying, what I think you said was, if they're on their own network and you're not providing the access, then you're not worrying about it, and I disagree. I'm saying that with bring your own device, I think you need to be aware of 3G, 4G, and in our policy, we're saying that they shouldn't be using 3G.
according to the FCC, I cannot filter out
I
the
understand.
cellular connection.
But you can say that a student shouldn't use it in your classroom.
We can say it, but there's no way a teacher is going to be able to manage that in a classroom.
What I've seen, it's a lot of acceptable use policies rewritten, saying that when you enter the front door, you must be on a Wi-Fi. And then if they misbehave, guess what? They have broken their AUB until they take them off the network for 2 weeks.
You can't interfere with the cell signal.
FCC will not allow you.
Yeah, you're getting into the liability issue with 911, and most of the districts, because you're independently located, you don't have to, you have to specifically go screen, but if mom and daddy are giving them that internet access, you're asking for BYOD device, you're not asking for an internet device. And that, you're going to have to deal with that. It's a classroom control issue, and you cannot have the teachers as the first line of IT defense. That's not what they're going to do.
We all deal with that issue now, and even if you don't have a BYO in place, you're still dealing with that issue because students have 3G, 4G capable devices. I mean, if I'm a student, I go into a classroom and I'm surfing for inappropriate content, who's ultimately responsible? That's the student's responsibility, in my opinion. Hard to enforce.
So, great discussion points. I do want to remind you, I see a couple people that are leaving. Again, we're going to have a drawing at the end of our session, at the end of tomorrow, for a Kindle Fire. So if anybody hasn't gotten that to me, please drop it off at the front.
Thank you guys all for coming. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Dan and